Hello, I'm Josh George here doing a video. OU in Texas joining the SEC here. This is a scheduled preview. I've got Oklahoma's already out, but this is what the pod system would look like. So, as you can see, you've got four pods, which are like four divisions. You've got Texas A&M in one pod, Oklahoma and Arkansas in Texas. Then in the other pod, you've got LSU, Missouri, Ole Miss, Mississippi State. Then you've got Auburn, Alabama, Tennessee, Vanderbilt, South Carolina, Kentucky, and Georgia in the fourth pod. So it's a very unique situation there with the SEC. It's going to take a conference tournament to crown an SEC champion. Now, here's Texas's schedule, and I've already put out OU's. So, with Texas's schedule, 2023, they open with the Rice Owls on September 2nd. Then they go to play at Alabama, which will be their first technical in-conference SEC football game. And at Alabama, it'll be an interesting open. You got to open with the big dog. Then they get to play Wyoming on September 16th. And then they play Florida. They get to host their first SEC game against a very tough opponent in the Florida Gators on September of 2023. Then Arkansas, they play Arkansas on September 30th before playing the Tennessee Volunteers on October 7th. And then the big rivalry game of the season for them, OU and they played the OU Texas game on the 14th of October 2023. They then have an off week on October 21st. And then the 28th, they're at the old Miss Rebels / Sharks. That's probably going to be their name by 2023. Now, November 4th, they're at Georgia and the Bulldogs. Then they get that November homecoming game. That SEC, we're in the SEC now. We get a homecoming game. We get to play an FCS in November. Their FCS team is Sam Houston State, the Bearcats with a K. Yes, that's how it's spelled. Then they are at home against an SEC opponent, against Mississippi State on the 18th. Then they're at Texas A&M on the 25th. And then, if they win their pod, they will play the winner of Pod 2, which will be either Missouri, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, or LSU. And then if they win that game, they go on to the SEC title game to be played December 9th. Next. Now, this season is 2024, and on August 31st, they open up with a Week 0 game against the Colorado State Rams here before September 7th stepping into a huge non-conference game against the Michigan Wolverines. Then they have to go at Arkansas on the 14th and at the Florida Gators on the 21st before getting to host their first conference game of that season against Alabama. They then get an off week on October 5th between the Alabama game and having to play OU. That's two juggernauts. Look at that challenge. Man, that's exciting. And then you get at Tennessee and at Mississippi State before your usual November playing a crap team. They get UTSA, the Road Runners, homecoming. And then the Georgia Bulldogs, the Ole Miss Sharks. They because they played a Week 0 game, they get a second bye week in there. And they happen to have it before their other big rivalry, their big in-state rivalry, Texas A&M on the 30th. And then, of course, Pod 1 versus Pod 2 on December 7th. Second week will be the SEC title. Next, the 2025. You can see they've got Ohio State. This is already on the schedule. Like, this is going to happen. They are going to, whether they're in the Big 12 or the SEC, August 30th, they are at Ohio State. And then September 6th, they're going to play San Jose Spartans. They do have a contract to bring them in for a season. And then they get to host Arkansas on the 13th. On the 20th, they get to play some of the teams from the other pods as it is rotated. They now get Vanderbilt I'm sure they're much more pleased with this side of the rotation. And then they're at Kentucky the 27th before having to play OU in Dallas on October 4th. October 18th of 2025, they're at Auburn. That's going to be a game that I want to watch. I mean, at Auburn after the OU game, man, that game is going to be interesting. Then they get their usual homecoming break against the UTEP Miners, and then South Carolina to start November, and the Missouri Tigers before going at LSU, and they finally get an off week, November 22nd. They get an off week before November 29th, having to play at Texas A&M. And then, of course, Pod 1 versus Pod 2 on the 6th. In the second week of December, you get the SEC title game. Now, here is how it is for their final season. And before I really get into this, I'm going to add a little bit. Kansas has contacted the Big Ten. It is official. They have had a meeting with them. It got over not too long ago. And Kansas is going to be a prospective member. And they're talking about adding the 2 Kansas schools to the Big Ten so that they can have a 16-team conference. So that this Pod 1 versus Pod 2, you're seeing at the bottom, that December 5th, so that they can have a playoff system for their conference championship as well. And their Big Ten's looking at going to the pod system as well. So this is going to be a thing in college football. And I expect the ACC to make some moves as well. They're looking at West Virginia since the Big Ten's full up, and they don't know who will come with West Virginia yet, though. But the Big 12 is, in fact, dismantling as we speak. So, into the schedule. September 5th, they have a deal with Texas State to open the year. And like I said, that home contract they've got with Ohio State puts them hosting Ohio State on September 12th. Then they get the Kentucky Wildcats on the 19th there. And then they get to host Auburn on September 26th. Then they're at Arkansas, the Razorbacks. That's October 3rd, 2026. Didn't put a space in there. Sorry about that, fellas. But that's their game before October 10th. They play in Dallas in the Cotton Bowl Red River rivalry game. And it's going to be a good one. They then get to heal up as they go at Vanderbilt, the Commodores. And then they have at South Carolina on the 24th. They then get a homecoming game against Houston, the Roadrunners. Then they're at Missouri to open November. And then they get 2 home games to close out the year against LSU on the 14th, bye week on the 21st, and then they close the 26th season against Texas A&M. And like I say, December 5th will be the Pod 1 versus Pod 2 and the SEC title game. I put out a video for OU detailing their schedule, and I might put one out if Kansas or the Big Ten, if they get serious, might do that with the Kansas teams, talking a lot about conference realignment. Put it down in the comments. How do you think this conference realignment is going to shake out? What is going to happen to the Big 12? I am Josh George.